Hello and welcome to the Randomly Generated History Club, where three non-historians pick a year at random and try to learn things about it. I'm Will, and I'm here with my two friends, Anna and Ant.
Hello.
Hi.
So before we get started with this week's year, Anna has a very important correction to make, right?
Yes, that's right. It's just been something that's been gnawing at me. So that we want this podcast to be as factual as possible.
Are we really doing this?
Yeah,
Okay.
This is real. In the 1629 episode, we were talking about the CCGS, Sir William Alexander, the Canadian Coast Guard boat that we said was used for counter-slooping.
Very important.
That is not the correction. We went into a little digression about the difference between a ship and a boat. And I said a ship can carry a boat, but a boat cannot carry a ship.
Yeah. That sounds right to me.
Yes. Well, this triggered a flood of emails from various naval personnel. And I feel like I need to issue a correction here. The difference is more technical than their relative sizes.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
The difference between a ship and a boat is which way they heel or skid when turning. A ship will heel outward during a turn. A boat will turn inward. And if that isn't immediately intelligible to you, think about the difference between a motorcycle and a car. A motorcycle will lean inward during a turn.
Right.
A car leans outward, and everybody in the back seat kind of gets pushed against the outer.
Okay.
So it's the same concept for a
But what
ship and a boat.
influences that? Is that like where you've got your drive coming from? Like, is it where you put your propellers?
Oh, it's a whole thing about the center of gravity. And listen, this isn't a...
Have we instantly reached the now new limit of your knowledge here?
Yes, yeah, we are...
So next week we have another correction as we talk about physics.
I imagine every week I will have something else to add about the difference between a ship
so
and a boat.
this is a new regular boaty ship section.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
I'm so glad it's actually not a historical correction, because then we're going to have to hold ourselves to a really high bar for accuracy, which I'm frankly not willing to do.
it would just occupy an entire second episode for every first episode in which we try and assert things about history
Just
to
sort
then
of
correct them.
Solemnly reading out a list of mistakes we made. I also do have one other quick follow-up.
Oh, okay.
In the 652 episode last week, I'd been tasked with a follow-up duty from both of you, which was to learn more about lentils.
This was very important for me.
Yeah, very important. I've tried to find out anything about them, but I can't.
Oh, conspiracy.
I think, yes, there's a big gap on the internet. No one really knows what a lentil is, and I suspect all my research is being blocked by big quinoa.
Yeah. We're in deep now, aren't we?
We are
God.
in deep.
There goes our sponsorship deals.
Yeah. So anyway, I will keep everyone posted, but it's hard.
Do you feel safe?
Not really. Big quinoa is an ancient grain.
Should we talk about some history?
Yeah, maybe let's do that.
Okay, cool. So this week we're going to talk about 1471.
Yep.
And I'd like each of us to give a 3-word preview of what we're discussing today. Anna.
My 3 words will be Marfa, Marfa, Marfa.
That's one word 3 times. I think we'll allow it.
Will we allow it?
Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean,
all right,
there are no rules.
Okay, but first warning.
For absolute first warning, my 3 words are going to be dark Medici conspiracy.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful. And my words are bastard, jester prickers.
I'm so excited.
Okay, great.
Right, 1471, here we go. Okay, so before we start, I'm very aware that in this series so far, I have mostly been talking about things that have happened in British history. And most of these things have involved kings fighting over the throne and Britishness and that sort of thing. So and some people might be wondering whether I am in some way obsessed with concepts of Britishness and of power.
Yeah.
But in fact, I've had a couple of emails to that effect, accusing me of precisely that.
Yeah, sorry about those.
I just...
Yeah, this is the only way we could tell you.
2 emails, one from each of you, which laid this out very clearly. So I just wanted to make that clear this week, that I'm very aware of those feelings. But there is a bloody brilliant battle in Britain in 1471 between 2 powers vying for control of the crown. And I am really going to struggle to talk about anything else.
Okay.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
Yeah. Be true to yourself.
And there are so many great characters in this story, like Warwick the Kingmaker.
Oh.
And Thomas the Bastard. And it makes me really sad that I can't really do justice to all of those characters. So I'm going to have to try and find another time to talk about them. When we do 1470, I can just cheat in some way, probably, inevitably, and talk about some of these people. Yes.
Please tell me that Thomas the Bastard is a blue train.
I
really hope that that's what this is based on.
It's the alter ego of the tank engine.
Yes, it is. Thomas the Bastard. I'm excited.
Because he doesn't. A lot of people don't realise that the tank engine has a clear nemesis in the programme and in the
Sir
books.
Topham Hat.
He's not the nemesis.
Oh, not in the fan fiction I've written.
Is Sir Topham Hat the PC word for the Fat Controller?
That's his name. His name is Sir Topham Hat.
Okay.
Oh God, we're so off track already.
No, we're not. This is
not
exactly bang on track.
Pun.
No, this is actually extremely...
It's going to be a long episode.
Okay, great.
Okay. So anyway, it would be a completely unrealistic expectation for anyone to think that I wouldn't talk about this amazing battle that happened. So don't try and control me. I'm going to talk about the Battle of Tewkesbury. Thanks. And this took place in Tewkesbury.
Whoa. You've lost me already.
And this is a place in England which is at the confluence of the River Avon and the River Severn. But I'm not going to go into the geography.
Good.
Because this is not a geography.
It's not the randomly generated geography club.
It's not. We discussed that as an option and rejected it. So this is a history podcast. So I'm not going to say any more about geography. And people should go to this battle site, by the way, as an aside, because there's lots of activities that happen there. There's an annual reenactment that happens that people shouldn't go to because it's just like an intensely dweeby thing to do.
Oh, hey, don't judge me for my dweeby activity.
As the local cobbler for this festival, I'm there every year.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to alienate those people, but I guess I have.
Yes, you have. Yeah.
This is a podcast for people who are like a cooler kind of folk who are interested in history, but don't go to these sorts of reenactments.
I'm excited for when we talk about the history.
Yeah, what the hell are they reenacting?
Well, all right, I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to tell you the story. But I did go down into a bit of a rabbit hole about the Tewkesbury Medieval Festival, which you can find out more about at tewkesburymedievalfestival.org. And some of the features they have at this festival and that they hold annually include roving minstrels, dragons, which I'm slightly dubious about that one, frankly, and this is the best one, a wild man of the woods. It's amazing. So maybe people should go.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back on board with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this battle was a hugely significant one in the Wars of the Roses, and that was a series of civil wars between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. So these two these two old families who were battling over the throne of England. And there is so much history and complexity to the Wars of the Roses, it turns out. And so I'm just not going to try and tell you anything. Or no, I'll tell you some things, but I'm not going to try and tell you everything about them because I would just mess that up, frankly.
Okay.
Fair.
So genuinely, listeners should go and read a book about this period because it's really fascinating. And obviously I'm not going to do that, but they should do that if they're interested. And we've spoken before about how much of like the Game of Thrones is inspired by this period. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of houses allying against each other, double crossing each other, murdering rivals. Apparently. There's dragons, men of the woods, men of the woods. so much. So it's just a very cool period to read about. And in fact, if people have book recommendations, they should email in with those or tweet us or something. So the battle itself was between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians, and the Yorkists were in a period of dominance in this big 30-year civil war period, and they'd defeated the Lancastrians about 7 years before in 1464, and the Lancastrian claim to the throne had been caught and had been chucked in prison. And so at this time, Edward, who's the Earl of March, had been ruling as King Edward IV for about 10 years, and the wife and son of the Lancastrian claimant had been in exile in France, so called Margaret and another Prince Edward, and for a bunch of very sensible reasons, which I definitely won't go into, they felt that they were running out of time to make an attempt to get the crown back. So,
can I ask one just clarifying question?
Yes.
Is there a good side and a bad side in this?
Or is it?
Is it like the Yorks are the good guys and the Lancasters are the bad guys, or is it more subtle than that?
Well, I'm famously a Yorkist. I don't know about you.
Okay, great. All right, carry on.
I do like the sausages from Lancashire, though.
Well, I don't want there to be any spoilers about what happened later on in British history, but one side does win.
Okay, well, as has happened in many wars.
Okay, so at this point, Margaret and her son, the Prince of Wales, this Lancastrian claimant to the throne, they arrived. They thought this was going to be their moment. They arrived back in England and they assembled some other loyalists and started heading for their heartlands, which are in Wales. So they're trying to get across the River Severn into Wales. And the Yorkists are then trying to intercept them and stop them from being able to do that. So the night before the battle, the Yorkists then managed to get refuge in Berkeley Castle, which is up near this area of Tewkesbury, which it turns out was the last place in the country that there was a court jester.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
right.
good.
There you go.
Yeah, and there's nothing funnier than a court jester, right?
No.
Well, of course not.
Well, this one died
Without training his successor.
Oh, God.
by falling
Oh.
off the top of the castle.
Oh.
And
As part of a joke, like a prank, or...
No,
Oh, no.
no, just as a way to die.
Okay.
Just tripped and fell.
Yikes.
And everyone was so sad that his boss wrote an epitaph for his grave, I guess. And that epitaph is extremely confusing. So the epitaph is this, and try and see if you can understand, if you can interpret the meaning of this thing. So, here lies the Earl of Suffolk's fool. Men called him Dicky Pierce. His folly served to make folks laugh when wit and mirth were scarce. Doesn't even rhyme.
Slant rhyme. It's fine. I'll allow it.
All right, fine. Well, poor Dick, alas, is dead and gone. What signifies to cry? What does signifies mean in this context?
I don't know.
Yeah, nor do I.
Yeah.
Weird. Dickies enough are still behind to laugh at by and by. So I get his jokes are still left behind, and we can laugh at the jokes he made,
fine.
I guess.
I mean, like,
I think that's really nice.
it's quite nice, but also not the best of epitaphs.
Right.
But I guess, like, if he's the ruler, he gets to write the epitaph, and everyone else just say that's great.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I guess that he wasn't really criticised.
Poor Dicky. Dicky,
Yeah.
what was his second name?
Dicky Pierce.
Dicky Pierce fell off the castle.
Yeah.
Last court jester there ever was. Anyway. So back to the battle. So the Lancastrians had tried to escape, but the Yorkists had found them by a clever use of scouts called prickers.
Okay.
And these highly motivated prickers had pricked very effectively, and the Yorkists caught them. So the Lancastrians have to turn and fight with these little rivers around behind them in a kind of crescent shape. So they had quite secure flanks and a quite secure rear, but they also couldn't really maneuver very much. And then on the other side, the Yorkists had a little wood off to one side of them, and they're a bit worried about the Lancastrians being able to infiltrate through the woods. They put 300 pikemen in there to stop the Lancastrians sneaking through. And they were there facing off against each other, and it was up to the Yorkists to try and attack. So they set off to advance, but the ground was unexpectedly really boggy and wet, like those really annoying thick bits of grass where you think it's just going to be grass, and then there's actually clumps of earth underneath, and then you step on it, and you just slightly sprain your ankle, and it's really annoying. Yep. Yeah, so it's like that all the way, basically.
That sounds awful. And then you come to the wood line and you get pricked by not the prickers, but the pikemen, who I guess are assistant prickers, because that's quite prickly too.
It's a real pincer movement.
It
Two
is,
pricks.
2 pricks, 1
Battle.
So their attack slowed, and they were counterattacked by the Lancastrians, who sensed their moment, seeing this attack slow. But then, at that moment, the pikemen in the woods came in from the flank. So they'd been there to stop this infiltration. There was no infiltration, and they were just sneakily positioned off to a wood now at this point, and could then charge into the Lancastrians. And that was enough to make the Lancastrians begin to turn and run. And then Somerset, who was one of the commanders of the Lancastrians, was super pissed, and he wasn't supported by Wenlock, who was another guy who was commanding the centre of the force. And apparently he galloped up to him and asked him basically, WTF, where were you? And then I quote, he did not wait for an answer, but dashed out Wenlock's brains with a battle axe.
Oh,
Jesus.
Wow.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty pissed.
Yeah.
But I guess he won the argument.
Emphatically.
So it was a total Yorkist victory, and they found the 17-year-old Prince of Wales in a grove nearby, and despite pleading for his life to one of the Yorkist nobles, he was just summarily executed on the spot.
Oh.
And despite and great in wonderful Game of Thrones style, that same noble had sworn allegiance to the Prince of Wales less than a year before in France.
Oh my God.
So that was all.
You hate to see it.
It's great stuff. And the Lancastrian king, Henry VI, was shortly afterwards back in the Tower of London. So this is the sort of vanquished king, claimant to the throne. And then he mysteriously and very conveniently died in captivity. And the deposed king's death was announced to the public with the story that he had died of pure displeasure and melancholy.
Oh,
which
honestly, better than falling off the castle roof.
Or being killed through torture in the Tower of London, there's also that.
Right, yes, which is actually what happened.
Oh, yeah. Right. Damn.
Bummer.
But I don't think anyone really brought that.
My bubble there.
So the outcome was that this Yorkist King Edward was back on the throne, and he ruled for another 12 years, and he got fat and became part of what then inspired Robert Baratheon's character in Game of Thrones. There you go. Battle of Tewkesbury.
Battle of Tewkesbury. I've learned so much.
Yeah.
Well, I've got no follow-up questions.
I have too many follow-up questions. I can't triage them. I am talking today about what is now Russia, but what at the time was an ununited Russia. It was a couple of different principalities and regions. The Grand Duchy of Moscow had been gaining power for decades, but is technically still a vassal state of the Mongol Empire. And the Muscovites, their chief rival is the Republic of Novgorod. And my Russian pronunciation throughout this is going to be hilariously excellent. So the Novgorod Republic existed from 1136 to 1478. It covered part of what's now Finland, northern Russia. It was very prosperous. It was part of the Hanseatic League, a lot of trading. It was the only principality of modern-day Russia that was never conquered by the Mongols. Oh. It had a flourishing art sector, unusually high levels of literacy, lots of democratic ideas. There was a series of public assemblies called the Vietsia, and a highly developed government. And
I'm assuming that like a higher than ordinary like literacy is like just some.
Yes, yeah, as in like maybe a woman could read, which is really big for the time, if we're being honest. So in case my sort of leading paragraph hasn't let you guess, these are the good guys in the story.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So there's a historical tension with Moscow, between Moscow and Novgorod. The lands in northern Novgorod had lots of resources, specifically furs. Apparently the area had so much fur that medieval travel accounts talk about furry animals raining from the sky.
Can I ask about the type of fur, please?
I imagine it's a lot of mink and bear. Probably not many chinchillas.
Thank you for clarifying.
But you never know.
That's all my first chinchilla, so I would not be going there.
So the Novgorodians fight a series of war with the Muscovites to control these lands, but they keep losing. And ultimately, in 1456, they signed the Treaty of Yaselbitsi, which doesn't directly put them under Muscovite control, but it greatly weakens their position. And the boyars, the leaders of Novgorod, know they can't fight the rising power of Moscow forever. So one option they have is to ally with Poland, Lithuania. Poland and Lithuania are already allied as a way to save the Republic. And that's when we meet our heroine today, Marfa. Marfa, Mike Alpha Romeo Foxtrot Alpha Marfa.
Thank you for spelling.
Good.
Just in case anyone thought I was saying Marfa.
Is she the first of 3 Marfas that will feature in the story?
She is Marfa 1. Marfa Beretskaya, she's the wife of Isaac Beretski, who's the posadnik, the town official, a very important man.
I consider myself the posadnik of this podcast.
I think you're the Marfa.
That's you'll see that's a compliment.
Oh, damn, I take it back.
Isaac dies, so you're dead, Will. But Marfa survives him, and she kind of inherits his land and his wealth, and she becomes a very wealthy person, but she's still this really kind of charismatic, influential matriarch of the Republic. When her husband dies, she and her sons take up this anti-Moscow cause as the de facto leaders of the movement. She invites the Prince of Lithuania to Novgorod and suggests that he marries her to become her husband and the ruler of the Republic. I can confirm that tactic doesn't always work. Sometimes they show up and they're like, what am I ruling? And you realize it was all a lie.
So she just suggests to him they marry?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was successful for her?
Well, it wasn't but for reasons.
Okay.
Historical reasons.
Historical reasons.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not geographical reasons.
No, Muscovite reasons, which I'll come on to here. She attempted to form an alliance with Casimir, who's the King of Poland and the Grand Duke of Lithuania. They draft a treaty of the alliance. And now Ivan III, who's the Grand Prince of Moscow, hears about all of this outreach to his enemies and is like, no, those maneuvers violate the terms of the treaty that Novgorod signed with Moscow, which is like, you can't fight us and you can't ally with our enemies to fight us. Fair. So he sends an army to quash any talk of alliance, to stomp down the uprising before it can really kick off. This is the Battle of Shilon River in July 1471. And the Muscovites and Ivan handily win. Marfa's son, Dmitri, is executed, and her other son, Fyodor, is arrested and then later dies in exile. But Marfa...
If I had been telling the story, it would have been 98% about that battle.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's a big difference between you and me.
I'm so glad you're telling this story.
Carry on.
There were a bunch of pikemen waiting in the forest, and then there was a river. So Marfa, despite this immense setback, continues the fight. She draws on Lithuania's support for the next 7 years to keep up the fight against Moscow. But in 1478, Ivan finally defeats Novgorod for good. Marfa's land is confiscated. She and her grandsons are taken into custody, escorted to Moscow. It's unclear what happened to her after that. I think we can probably guess. I mean, the best possible outcome is that she took the veil and joined a convent, but it's probably likely that she...
Best possible outcome is probably like she goes to Mauritius with a handsome man and lives the rest of her life there.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds
she
great.
weaves herself a coat of chinchilla fur.
Is that your judgment, that you think taking the veil is the best possible thing that can happen to a woman?
Wow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
This is
Brides
a
of
lot
Christ. According to history.
Oh, I see.
So no one really knows when or where she died. So it could have been Mauritius. I think that's nice. It's not impossible. But one thing that definitely happened was that she became kind of a folk hero. She's romanticized by a lot of later Russian writers like Pushkin. And there's a highly stylized lyric poem by Nikolai Karamzin, and I want to read some of it. It's very long and very sort of emotional, but so buckle up. And just to set the scene, Ivan's representative is in the middle of the town square at the Vietsia, the assembly, and he's giving them this whole spiel about how Novgorod is great, but they should join up with Ivan because he has awoken the ancient courage of the Slavs, and the fatherland must be united, and independence is overrated. And the Novgorodians are not having any of this, and so they start shouting, Marfa, 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 to get her to speak. And here are just some of her lines as translated for us here. So, I will speak the truth to the people of Novgorod, and I am ready to prove it with my blood. Behold, a woman dares speak at the Vetsia, but my family is an ancient one, and I was born in a military camp to the sound of swords clanging. She
sounds pretty badass.
She's awesome. She's so cool. She goes on and on about the history of Novgorod and why it's amazing and why Moscow sucks. And she ends by saying kind of like, Ivan wants to rule over this great city. It is hardly a shock. He has seen its glory and riches with his own eyes. But all the people on this earth, all future generations would never cease to wonder if we willingly submit to him. What can he offer us? Only miserable words. Only the pitiful desire change when they are prosperous.
Wow. I kind of want to fight Moscow now. I am riled up.
I know. Marfa is she's awesome. And she was like such an inspirational figure. And
do swords clang? Is that the noise they make?
I do guess if the swords are clanging in the camp that you're born in, that means the enemy are in your camp.
Yeah.
So maybe,
or just a lot of training.
Because the clangers, which British adults of a certain age will be familiar with, famously make a sort of whistling noise on the moon, don't they? And
this is the time in the podcast when any American listeners can go look that up.
Yeah, well, they would do well to...
Oh, no, I'm going to aggressively edit this out, don't you worry.
They'd do well to go down.
So I'm just going to end, with one more little piece of this poem, which, by the way, was translated by a man named Nicholas Kotar. So I found this on his website. Marfa, the mayoress of Novgorod, standing on the platform, glorifies in the ardor produced by her speech. To arouse their minds yet more, she raises a chain above her head, shakes it loudly, then casts it down on the ground. The people, furious, stomp on the chain with their feet screaming. Novgorod is our Tsar. War against Ivan.
Wow.
But then, just as a reminder, they do ultimately lose. But
I mean, that's pretty heroic.
That's pretty cool, right?
What an impressive person to stand up and, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather be on the victorious side.
You'd rather be the chain.
Yeah.
You'd rather be the chain than the screaming feet.
Well, I don't wouldn't you? I'd rather have proper military glory than rhetorical glory. Don't you think?
That's just less romantic. They came in and they just blew them away with cannons, and that was it.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather have the princeling of Lithuania and my chinchilla coat
in Mauritius.
So strongly team Marfa over here. And that is the tale of Marfa Beretskaya.
Well, if there are any Lithuanian princes out there that we can suggest marriage to, do get in touch.
You can find me on Twitter at randomlyamfm.
Or a convent willing to take someone else for a veil.
The best possible outcome.
Yeah, we'll dial you in.
Cool. So, for my section, 1471, I'm going to tell you about Marsilio Ficino's translation of the Corpus Hermeticum to Latin, which is published.
Wow.
This sounds heavy.
Yes.
Riveting.
Are you sure you don't want to reassess?
No, there's a battle with a river somewhere I'm sure I could cover as well. No, I'm not going to reassess. This is actually fascinating. So, first of all, I recognize those are a lot of words that don't make sense when said together. So I need to break this down quite a bit more. So I'm being unusually structured in that I've broken down my next 10 minutes or so into 3 chapters.
Ooh, okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 1, conspiracy.
As ever.
So, who was Marsilio Ficino? He was an Italian scholar, an astrologer, an academic and a philosopher, and also a later priest. He was extremely influential during the early stages of the Italian Renaissance, and he was very influential on the humanist movement, which the humanist movement is the base of Christian thought that carries to this day, which holds the principles of universal human dignity, individual freedom, and the importance of happiness as core tenets of teachings of Christianity, which is kind of opposed to some of the parts of later Puritanism and then some prior to that, where it's about happiness is reserved for the afterlife, so kind of just suck it up. His father was a doctor, and he's the doctor to Cosimo Medici.
Oh,
and so he was actually part of this Medici household, and was a tutor to one of the Medicis himself. So he was very well thought of, and he had really good sponsorship and patronage. And you all know my thoughts on Medicis by now, which are they're the core of all historical events. There are a lot of batshit conspiracy about them online, by the way. Just New
Most
World
of them
Order. Most of them are mine.
Are they connected to Big Quinoa?
They're definitely connected to Big Quinoa and boat, steering. They're definitely massive in the Renaissance for sure. Big time swingers.
Huge.
No, I mean obviously. Probably that as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, with this leg up in life, he couldn't go too far wrong. Being tied to the richest family in Italy, he was able to focus on the most important topics in life, like philosophy and astrology, and what he calls, just quote, the soul, which is definitely a topic of study. Sure, why not? But he was very successful, and he brought together this sort of new way of thinking. So this brings us to chapter 2. Catholic Church ahoy. He was a trained physician, but because the sort of power dynamics, it was very prudent for him.
Can I just interrupt? I think you could structure everything you say on this podcast involving the same first 2 chapters as you've got here.
I mean, this is
everything seems to come back to this for you.
You'd be surprised how much religion played a role in the history of Europe during this time.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Hot take.
Reasonable.
So he studied to be a priest because that's actually quite beneficial from a sort of a power standpoint as well, to have a Medici-sponsored priest inside the church. But he was really into Plato and sort of rediscovering some of the ancient thinking and ancient philosophers. And he was an influential lead, and when he'd talk, people would listen, and he would give these treatises. And as such, that actually led him getting the job of being appointed as the head of the now refounded Plato Academy.
Oh.
It was very helpful that it was Cosimo that started this, and so he needed to appoint someone as the figurehead, which was this guy. Nepotism was really rife during the Renaissance, which is great if you're, part of the Medici clan.
Yeah, if you're nepotized.
However, It was his dabbling in astrology that got him a bit of trouble with the Catholic Church. He was really keen on digging up old texts, some of these Hermetic texts as they were known, some Greek philosophers. It was like allegorical in stories, basically plagiarism. And he was accused of heresy by Pope Innocent VIII. So he was brought up in charges of saying, like, your teachings about astrology are like, he talked about magic, he talked about a bunch of different things. There was obviously a lot of physics involved as well, but it's also blended into this kind of, into the sort of slightly heretical at the time thinking. He was acquitted, which is quite unusual, but that has nothing to do with the fact that the Medici Bank was the one that was bankrolling the Catholic Church and was responsible for collecting the tithes from everyone. So Cosimo was able to say, we don't have any historical basis for this, but is potential that the Cosimo could have tightened the purse strings on the Catholic Church had one of his favorite, household members been put up for sure.
Yeah, and maybe the guy conveniently read his horoscope that morning and it's like, wow, you will totally screw over Pope Innocent VIII and make me free. That's so strange.
Yeah. After this, he was taken off regular Sunday church duty, but it meant he could focus more on his writings.
So what was his regular Sunday church duty?
Doing masses and stuff, and that kind of thing. Regular priest activity.
Right.
Wearing a cardigan, having biscuits with people. I don't know. What do priests do?
Well, I think wearing a cardigan is their chief responsibility.
Yeah,
okay,
really
so cardigan on, talk at people, hand out biscuits.
Sales.
Yeah,
Medici has a massive hustle in clothing.
God, you're right. It goes all the way to the top.
Got it.
But anyway, his writings, he wrote several books that are quite famous, actually, even to this day. One was called Of Love, and he also wrote the 3 books on life about physical health, prolonging life, and then finally astral influences. Amazing.
Sorry,
Astral.
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 Can you remind me of his name? I'm gonna go on Amazon and get prolonging life.
Marsilio Ficino.
Marsilio Ficino.
Sometimes just called Ficino. He was a prolific writer. Spoiler alert, a lot of these were kind of slightly raunchy. And he had some really kind of niche views for a man that swore a vow of celibacy. And he said that love, it just boils simply down to the desire of beauty. So there was no personality. There was no it's just beauty.
Yeah, I think history bears that out.
And his quote from the book is, "The purpose of love is the enjoyment of beauty." And that was followed by some rather crude drawings of naked women.
What a horny priest.
Yeah, it's a pretty horny priest. You can see why he wasn't really the flavour of the month with the church. His books had lots of esoterica, magic, sex. Kind of sounds like a cool dude, if I'm being honest. But one of the interesting facts is that he is the one that coined the term platonic love.
He is not. Is he?
He is.
Really?
Because he used to write platonic love letters to his lifelong friend Giovanni Calvacatini. So his mate, who he loved, and he would stress in his letters that I love you, but not in a sexual way. Here's some pictures that I crudely drew. And he coined the term platonic love, which is a pretty cool fact, I think.
That is
Do we
a cool
think
fact.
he doth protest too much?
Yeah.
There could be a little bit of this as well, for sure.
I mean, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those letters. And sometimes it's just true.
If you're writing a letter, there's more to it than platonic love.
Yeah, well.
So, this brings us neatly to one of his most famous publications, Chapter 3, Corpus Hermeticum.
Okay.
So this is a major work of his, which was he published the Hermeticum into Latin. The Hermeticum were a loose collection of Greek philosophical allegorical tales from about 100 to 300 CE-ish, normally widely dispersed, not centralized, and told in the style of this dialogue conversation between 2 figures. And they were actually quite thought to be more ancient than this. So he was working in some other translations that actually were older. I think he some Hebrew texts, and then he stopped that because he found this Hermeticum that he wanted to do, and that was seen to be more ancient knowledge indeed. This sort of text and this sort of time is also the founding of some of the Gnostic Christianity, which is, the sort of esoteric side to Christianity. And it's broadly the start of Western esoteric tradition of allegorical secrets and things like that. So things like the Freemasons, etc., probably, riffed on a lot of this kind of stuff from here.
Okay.
So the corpus is split between 18 treatises, ranging from sort of foundational myths of the universe to definitions of like philosophical things like what is God, what is thought, what is matter, fate, what is intellectual essence. So it's pretty self-serving and wafty throughout. And you read any of this kind of stuff, it's like it reads kind of like a 15-year-old's like diary a little bit.
I was going to say I've written a lot of those questions.
But it's fascinating because Ficini saw this as sort of universal truth that he was inheriting, and he had this really interesting philosophical approaches to things, which is this Prisca theology or arcane theologian sort of philosophy, where he was but one philosopher inheriting knowledge, interpreting and passing it forward through time. So he was this part of this chain of a long chain of philosophers and interpreters of divine wisdom that God saw fit to progressively unfold over time to new people. As you inherited this knowledge, you would think about it, God would inspire you, and you would discover more about the world. And that's why our worldview was changing over time. And this was just unpacking the puzzle one piece at a time. There's kind of this beautiful like life is ever evolving and like you're part in it, you're just part of this chain.
He sounds like the kind of guy who after like philosophy 101 in college would be like, what is the same red that I see, the same red as you see? I mean, he sounds like he's just kind of...
That first date with this guy. Oh my, you're sitting in the student rec or something.
Yeah,
and
you'd
like,
be praying for platonic love after a date with him.
But it is a very different way of thinking things rather than sort of perennial philosophy, which is this sort of school of thought where there is one defined, indelible and immutable truth. We just haven't discovered it yet, rather than truth is evolving over time. So there's kind of an interesting sort of philosophy backing to this. So, I mean, I guess, so what is the point? So what of this guy? So basically, this translation put humanity, the thought of the individual, at the forefront of cultural advance, rather than just the divine as something unknowing. It's like there's some divinity within us. And that means that you suddenly didn't have the sort of opulence versus God debate. You could have art and culture together while worshipping God. And so it basically got the Catholic Church on side to the Renaissance as well. And so that means you had the sort of pairing of human struggles and human tradition and human cultural advances that were also still glorifying God, because you were celebrating the humanity that, you know, God had given you. So that was one of the main striking points of the tinderbox for the Renaissance, because it shifted the people's thinking and it allowed for worldly beauty, investment into oneself, and human-centric thought. And it's just profoundly fundamental in subsequent philosophical thought and setting the scene for the Renaissance going forward. So,
That's pretty cool.
Overall, Ficino, good job.
We like that guy. Yeah. Good stuff.
You can be rich and holy. I like that message.
Yeah. That's basically it.
Did he think that he was going to discover the universal truth?
No, he just thought he was one of the long chain of people and that he would forever continue evolving.
I wonder if he thinks it's been found now.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we've nailed it.
I think we've got it. Yeah. What do you think the universal truth is, Will?
Let's not answer this. A well-defended riverbank.
Yeah, exactly. Elevated positions of pikemen.
Sweet.
Well, there you have it. 1471. That's everything you need to know. Okay, so we've been getting quite a few emails in, and I'd like to read one of them out.
That is shocking to me.
How many of them are from Navy people mad about boats?
Yeah, there are a few. So here's one here from someone called Wronged Krettle.
Wronged Krettle.
Krettle.
Krettle. Krettle.
Gonna guess not their real name.
I think I went to school with a Krettle.
And I'd like to read it out to you. It has a few ups and downs. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride. So we'll just go straight into it.
Great.
The subject is, thank you both for an amazing podcast.
Both.
Okay.
There are three of us.
Yeah.
So interesting to know who Krettle is referring to. Dear Anna and Ant.
Oh, that's us. Yay. They like us. They don't like you. Suck it, Will.
Good. So you can see what they've done there.
Yeah.
Clever. Thank you for an amazing podcast.
Hey, that's very sweet to hear.
Wonderful.
Surely we should just stop now.
Well, I'm afraid, there is a bit of a dive down here. So I really enjoy your spoof podcast about two people who don't do enough research and so produce something without any academic merit, comedic value, or, I assume, financial return.
How do they get it so accurate?
Now it's feeling very suspicious that Will is not one of the addressees.
It's bang on, isn't it?
It's pretty bang on. Anything more to this?
Your podcast is the wrong combination of history and comedy, and I wish you the best of luck.
That is fantastic.
Now, can you give me the pseudonym again?
Wronged Kretel.
Wronged Kretel.
I mean, that wasn't a compliment sandwich, it's good, bad, good. That was like...
It was just up, down, wasn't it?
Sandwich.
No, I think it was like up and then down, down,
that
down.
Was just shit on a cracker.
No, because Kretel, I feel like it's a woman. I don't know.
Well, I've been doing some anagrams over here. Yeah. I've rearranged the letters in wronged Kretel. Ooh. And one thing it can spell is détente walk girl.
Détente walk girl.
Girl with 2 R's and no I.
Oh,
so
I see.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think we've
détente walk girl.
Well, thank you very much for that letter, and please do keep writing in. It's great to hear from you. We've had a lot of email traffic, and so we're going to keep replying to you, and maybe you'll get featured on the show.
And yeah, if someone wants to pick on Will, that would be fun too.
Also, please, our egos really need some good parts. So
maybe even one day we might be able to have people recommend which year we're going to do and that sort of thing. We can think about that. Oh. We have no clear plans around this, but you can always email and suggest things,
really?
And we'll either ignore them
PowerPoint or of 10 years progression for this. Yeah. Well, we covered off a lot. Thanks for joining us. I think that's everything you've ever wanted to know about 1471. Any questions, comments, as usual, find us on Twitter or visit our website, randomlygeneratedhistory.com.
And that means it's time to choose our next year. So, Will, can you please boot up the random number generator?
Yes, I can. It's just warming up now. Okay, it's at operating temperature. And the next year is 1649.
Oh.
Didn't we do that?
Wow, no, we did 1629.
Oh,
wow.
So 20 years later.
20 years
follow
later.
Up on the stuff that we...
Yeah, we can just do like a sequel for everything we talked about.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Okay, see you next week.